taking into account the circumstances and the compulsions of a coalition polity, I have done as best as I could do under the circumstances.
We have Mr. N.K. Singh, who is the ex-chair of 15th Finance Commission, also joining us to talk about the legacy of Dr. Manmohan Singh. Thank you so much, Mr. Singh, for joining us on the show. And you've also worked in very close quarters. You watched him also in very close quarters. That is Dr. Manmohan Singh. And what are what's your take on his life and legacy?
It was a very complex question because I had the privilege of working with him from the very first day that he joined the Indian government, which is in 1971. When he came as the economic advisor to the Ministry of Commerce, at that time I was in the Commerce Ministry. We worked quite closely. Shortly thereafter, he then moved as Chief Economic Advisor in the Ministry of Finance. From then onwards, in multiple ways, I had the privilege of working with him closely.
We are remembering the legacy of Dr. Manmohan Singh. We have Dr. Shankar Acharya joining us right now to talk about the legacy, the life of Dr. Manmohan Singh. Thank you so much, Dr. Acharya, for joining us. And you also worked very closely when you talk about Dr. Manmohan Singh. What were your life lessons from him?
Well, Anisha, my life lessons, first of all, I have to say, I think he was one of the greatest public servants that India's been blessed with. And I think we should all be thankful for that. I think in terms of what his major contributions, especially during his time as finance minister, there were probably, in my view, four. First, sort of opening up to the world economy, reduction of customs duties and import controls, liberalization of capital inflows like FDI and FII, and of course, very importantly, the moving towards a market-determined exchange rate. Secondly, I think financial sector reforms, which are so important, freeing up interest rates, which were earlier controlled, opening up the banking sector to private banks, the development of the capital market, NSE, NSDL, SEBI, and I think thirdly, according much greater autonomy to the RBI and empowering independent monetary policy. Finally, I think he valued the creation of a top team of economic managers in both the Ministry of Finance and the RBI, and kind of believed in the importance of continuity of people, not just policies. The two go together. So those are some of the lessons I learned in my time with him when he was finance minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Dr. Acharya, I think those are just some of the lessons that I'm sure you would have had with all the interactions and the pleasure of the interactions you had with him. But since you were working with him at close quarters, let me attempt to ask you this difficult question. It is a bit of a hypothesis, but if he was right now, let's say, in capacity of an RBI governor or finance minister, what do you think would have been the most important thing that he would be looking at or wanting to do?
Well, I think one of the things that I think, this is a tough question and it's a hypothetical, so we have to put it in that context. But I think that he would have, one of the few people who understood the importance of foreign trade to our economic development, growth and everything else, growth and employment, I would say particularly. And he, if you remember, aside from his reforms in the 90s, he's one of the people pushing for having, more integration through regional trade agreements, FTAs, and so on. So I think if you were there, you would have today probably seen India far better linked with, free trade agreements, whether it's RCEP or the CPTPP and these, which I think are, particularly in an uncertain world, very important because you have, if everything is shifting, power politics is shifting internationally, economic stuff is shifting internationally. It's very important to be engaged in with economies that are growing fast in East and Southeast Asia. And that is something which I think he would have focused on, perhaps more so than has been done in the last few years.
Right. Dr. Acharya, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Right now we have Mr. Yashwant Sinha, who's a former Finance and External Affairs Minister, joining us to talk about the life and the legacy of Dr. Singh. And thank you so much, Mr. Sinha, for joining us on the show today. And yes, India is mourning a loss of an illustrious statesman and also a great economist.
Yes, and rightly so, because Dr. Manmohan Singh was an exceptional individual who distinguished himself in a number of positions that he held in the government and came out with flying colors in all of them. I remember coming in contact with him long before we both entered public life, and we were both serving the Government of India at that time. I was Joint Secretary in the Shipping and Transport Ministry, as it was known then, and he was Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission. Asian Games were around the corner, and I was also heading the Delhi Transport Corporation, and I felt that we needed a very large number of buses to meet the crowd that will assemble for the games. We had no, mass public transport system. So I approached Dr. Manmohan Singh as Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission, and he was very kind to agree to my proposal and sanction the purchase of 1,900 buses. Imagine at that point of time. Then, subsequently, I came in contact with him, very close contact with him, when he returned from the South-South Commission and became advisor to Prime Minister Chandrasekhar for that brief period. And I remember we were working on the budget at that time. And whenever I used to go discuss the contours of the budget, naturally Dr. Singh used to be there, and he used to participate in the discussions. And as you're aware, actually, the 1991 budget had been more or less gotten ready in my time, but unfortunately, the Congress party, which was supporting the Chandrasekhar government, did not allow us to present the budget for some flimsy reason. So that was not to be. Then, I met Dr. Manmohan Singh repeatedly. We were in Parliament together. There are many occasions when, we crossed swords in Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. And I was always very happy doing it because, you were up against an adversary who was very well informed and yet very humble, very polite. So you can tackle an adversary who is not polite. It becomes difficult to tackle an adversary who is so polite. So that was it. Hello?
Absolutely, sir. Mr. Sinha, he is definitely a statesman, economist, and visionary leader that he's going to be remembered as. But as we remember his legacy, we just also wanted to ask you if there are any memories that stand out to you that you wanted to share with us, perhaps.
Oh, there are lots of memories, not one or two. As I said, because when he was Prime Minister and I was a member of the opposition benches in Parliament, then, as I said, we often crossed swords. And there were a number of arguments between him and me, or even otherwise. And as you will recall, I was generally the spokesperson of the Bharatiya Janata Party on economic issues. So, as Prime Minister, he often used to be in Parliament, unlike other Prime Ministers who did not attend Parliament. Dr. Manmohan Singh was always in Parliament.
So many capacities and a great legacy that he's left us all with, and it's not just for every Indian to see, it is all across the world that you've seen the sort of fruit of the policies that he had actually laid down. Thank you so much, Mr. Damani, for joining us on the show and helping us also fondly remember Dr. Manmohan Singh. We also have Mr. K.M. Chandrasekhar, who is the former Cabinet Secretary, joining us right now. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on such an occasion, on a day where we are remembering or celebrating the legacy of Dr. Manmohan Singh. Any fond memories that you have of Mr. Singh?
Thank you for calling me. Now, about Manmohan Singh, there are many memories because I knew him right from 1994 when I was Finance Secretary of Kerala. From then onwards, I've always been impressed by his, not only his erudition, his humility, which you have already mentioned, and his capacity to take decisions as and when they came along after wide consultation and as fast as trying to build a consensus. I thought he was a man of great nobility, great ideas, and great values, and I enjoyed working with him.
Mr. Chandrasekhar, hi, this is Anisha also joining in the conversation. You've worked with him at close quarters for a very, very long time. Help me understand, had you ever seen him get angry? Had you ever seen him frustrated when the consensus building was getting difficult? Did you ever see him in a bad mood or, not taking things well?
Well, I have not seen him angry. I think anger was not an emotion that really he went through at any time. But I have seen him get disturbed. I saw him disturbed, for example, when the Sedu Samudram issue came along. If you recall at that time, the DMK government, the DMK was in power in Tamil Nadu. We had Balu there as a minister, cabinet minister, and they wanted to cut through the Adams Peak, as they call it, or Ram Setu, as others would call it, and so that ships can pass from one side of Sri Lanka onto Tuticorin. Now, that created a huge issue, and once he asked me, do you think this government will fall because of Sedu Samudram? He was obviously disturbed, but we managed to get through that crisis. We appointed, we tried various solutions, but there was no way in which the ships could pass through the Adams Peak without cutting through Adams Peak. But we looked at the solutions and there were no possible solutions. Ultimately, we appointed a committee, and the committee, Balu wanted it to finish within a few weeks. The chairman of the committee, I don't recall his name, but he was a very famous environmentalist. And he said, it will take me a full year because I've...
Okay. Unfortunately with Mr. Chandrasekhar, but I think the moot point was that Mr. Manmohan Singh or Dr. Manmohan Singh was clearly a man who tried to build consensus. Never saw him get angry, but of course he got frustrated when it was about doing better for the people, and he made sure he took that stand as and when needed. Clearly a very, very strong leader.
The day was 24th of July 1991. It was a day that changed the course of India's growth story. One that made every Indian dream big. And a large part of the credit goes to this man, a Congress veteran, Dr. Manmohan Singh. And on this day, the then Finance Minister presented his first ever budget, one that would be remembered for decades to come. The government by then was already going through testing times. Facing increasing oil prices and a fall in remittances from Indian workers owing to the Gulf War, the Indian state was on the verge of a sovereign default. At $6 billion, India had just enough forex reserves to support 2 weeks of imports. Harsh decisions had to be taken. The government, under the leadership of P.V. Narasimha Rao, then decided to devalue the Indian rupee and pledge gold holdings as immediate measure to shore up forex reserves. But it was a new industrial policy unveiled on the eve of the budget under the patronage of Manmohan Singh that proved to be the game changer. The policy relaxed provisions in Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act to facilitate easier entry and restructuring of businesses. The policy ended the public sector monopoly in many sectors. It also announced a policy for automatic approval of FDI up to 51%, as against the existing cap of 40% for foreign equity investments. These dramatic changes ended public sector monopoly in several sectors, except in those that were deemed critical to national security. These changes not only led to a steep upturn in the foreign goods entering Indian markets, but also a dramatic rise in foreign investment in the years to come. But the reforms didn't end there. Manmohan Singh took it further with multiple drastic changes to stall what seemed to be a crisis spiraling out of control for the country in 1991. Faced with a fiscal deficit, the budget increased corporate tax rates to 45%. The government also opened mutual funds to the private sector and relaxed investment norms for non-residents. These measures were followed by the introduction of a second trade policy package to boost exports and a package for developing small firms. Seeking immediate economic relief, he also applied for an emergency loan of $220 million to the IMF, which later proved to be critical in preventing a debt default for the nation. As the Finance Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh took drastic measures which not only rescued the nation but also propelled India into rapid economic growth. As the nation mourns the loss of one of India's greatest minds, the country will forever remain indebted to the astute economist who changed the course of India's growth story.